Hello everyone, my name is ThachPhamVu from EPFL Switzerland. First, I would like to thank you for your interest and participation in my session today. The title of my research is Sound Field Reconstruction in Rooms and its application in improving low-frequency room modes damping. So let's start. As you already know, at low frequencies, the sound is coupled with room walls by the standing wave phenomenon. This will create an uneven distribution of sound pressure in space and also frequency domain. Furthermore, we will also have an uneven modal decay times distribution, and this in turn will create masking effects and colorations on the resulting sounds, which will highly affect the listening experience. This is why a thorough understanding of the sound field in a room is highly appreciated for suggesting the corrective measures. The issue here is that most of the time the measurements in a room are usually performed in the frequency domain or time domain, but rarely do we really think about the spatial information of the sound field of the room which are embedded in these measurements. In a rectangular room, at least we usually have an estimation of the Modshapes and the modal frequencies. However, in a non-rectangular room, this phenomenon is even more complex and more unpredictable, as you can see on the video on the right, which depict the evolution of the modes in a reverberation chamber, which is a non-rectangular room. So a motivation of our project is to create a framework to reconstruct the acoustic in the room spatially. And this is very useful for the analysis of the room sound field, but also it will be very important that it can be used for the assessment of a room mode damping method, whether it's an active one or a passive one. The problem with the standard measurement techniques is that usually it will result in an impractically high number of measurements in the room, and also the results will have quite low accuracy and also resolution. So the solution right here that we use is to combine compressive sensing and low rank approximation techniques. And the process is usually involved in exploiting the sparsities in low frequency room acoustics. And this will lead to the reduction of the system's complexity. And this will in turn lead to a smaller number of measurements. So let's talk a little bit about the sparse properties that exist in low frequency room acoustics. There are two types of sparsities that we would like to tackle in this case. The first one is an inherent sparsity that exists within the wave solution of room acoustics. And the second one is a sparsity properties that involves an approximation theorem. So first, let's tackle the inherent sparsity in low frequency room acoustic through the modal decomposition form of the wave solution. So in low frequency room acoustic, the spatial temporal solution of the wave equations can be decomposed as a discrete sum of damped harmonic eigenmodes, as you can see in blue over here. So as you can see, by expressing the wave solution through a discrete number of eigenmodes, we already reduce the complexity of the system. But if you look at the equation over here, you can still see that we have phi n, which are the Modshape functions of the room. In a rectangular room, usually sometimes we can find a closed form solution for phi n, depending on which mode it is. But for a non-rectangular room, this is more difficult. In this second step, we make use of the Modshapes approximation technique, which states that each and every Modshape function phi n can be expressed by a finite weighted sum of plane waves sharing the same wave number. And one of the ways to create these plane waves is through spherical sampling. The interesting thing about this approximation is that it doesn't really care about what type of mode phi n is. So for each and every type of mode in the room, we can find an expression of the approximation using plane waves pointing in different directions. And this is very useful because it is very well adapted to non-rectangular rooms. Now let's move on to the reconstruction procedures. As you can see from the wave solution that we derived from before, if we know all of these highlighted parameters, we can solve this solution for every single X vector that we want. So basically that is the objective of the reconstruction framework. In this slide, you can see the structure of our reconstruction framework. So from M measurements, we perform the model identification in order to find out the eigenfrequencies of the room, which includes the frequency and damping of each and every mode. And then we perform spherical sampling in combination with least square projection in order to find out the expansion coefficients for each and every of the plane waves that we sampled. After all of these steps, we have found out all the highlighted parameters in this solution. Now let's move on to the results and application. So first, let's look at our numerical model, which is basically an FEM analysis of a non-rectangular room model. And we set the wall damping to be lightly damped with alpha equal to 0.01. We spread 20 to 30 microphones randomly inside of the room. And then the simulation data will be used for both the inputs and also for the validation of the framework. In order to analyze the results, we reconstruct a large rectangular volume which has a distance of at least 1 meter from each of the wall of the non-rectangular room. This is the results from our FEM model. So basically we are going to use this result as the ground truth in order to assess the reconstruction results. On the right here, you can see the results from our sound field reconstruction framework. And as you can see, not only that the point-to-point comparisons are highly accurate, but also the presence of the Modshapes are preserved in this reconstruction. As you can see from this particular comparison, we have only done it at one singular frequency around 35 Hertz. And that is why we try to expand it to other frequencies as well. For example, in this case, we have 3 different examples. The second and the third one are actually 2 other eigenfrequencies of the room. And that is why you can actually see very clearly the Modshapes of the room at these 2 eigenfrequencies. But we also try to reconstruct the sound field at a frequency in between 2 different eigenmodes. And as you can see, you also have a very good accuracy for this reconstruction as well. Now we would like to analyze the broadband performance of our sound field reconstruction framework. So as you can see, on the left here is our reconstructed sound field, and on the right is the reference sound field produced by our FEM analysis. And as you can see from the frequency evolution right here, that not only that the point-to-point comparison is accurate, but also the evolution of the Modshapes between the eigenmodes are also highly preserved in our reconstruction framework. We also further analyzed the effect of wall damping and number of measurements used in our reconstruction. As you can see in the graphs here, that as the number of microphones increases, so is the correlation between the reconstruction and the ground truth. Furthermore, the standard deviation also reduces significantly as we increase the number of microphones. Finally, we can also see that increasing the wall damping from 0.01 to 0.3 does have an effect on the accuracy of the reconstruction framework. However, we can always compensate this by increasing the number of measurements. After confirming the accuracy and the robustness of the framework, we then tested it using real experiments in an actual reverberation chamber within our facility, which our FEM model was based on. The reconstruction results can then be compared with the ones from our numerical studies. In this slide, we show the comparison between the reconstructed sound field and the numerical results at 2 different eigenmodes of the room. The reason why the actual frequencies are different is because this is the real room compared to its FEM model, which can only closely resemble the real one. Nevertheless, you can see that at the same eigenmodes, the depiction of the sound field using our reconstruction is still highly accurate and reliable. Finally, after confirming the performance of the framework numerically and experimentally, we move on to study one of the application of the framework, which is to assess the performance of active absorbers, in this case an electroacoustic absorbers developed at our lab in EPFL. The design basically consists of a closed box electrodynamics loudspeakers with impedance control at the membrane using an active multi-degree of freedom control circuit. The role of these absorbers is to equalize room mode in a broadband sense. As you can see from this one measurement that we have done, with 4 absorbers at 4 corners in the room modes are effectively equalized. However, with only one measurement at one location in the room, it is hard to understand how the actual sound field will look like with the presence of the absorbers. Here you can see the locations of the 4 absorbers that we have in the room. In this slide, we compare the sound field of the room with and without the presence of the absorbers using our reconstruction framework, and we compare it as well to its reference FEM model. And once again, as you can observe, the reconstruction are highly accurate, and what's more important is that it correctly depicts the equalizing effect spatially by the absorbers. Not just the fact that the maximum sound pressure is reduced with the presence of the electroacoustic absorbers, but also the evolution between the high and the low pressure region become less steep with the presence of the electroacoustic absorbers at the corners of the room. This is another example at a different frequency, and as you can see, the results are also the same. This proves that our framework can be used effectively to assess spatially the performance of active absorbers. In conclusion, we have shown that the reconstruction algorithm is valid for the sound field reconstruction, even in case of a non-rectangular room. We have also been able to achieve high accuracy for varied wall dampings. We have also shown that the reconstruction framework is very useful for assessing room acoustic and also to evaluate active or passive modal equalization methods. One of the future ideas that we have is to use the reconstruction results not just to assess the performance, but to also use it as an input for the active absorbers to increase its performance. This is an interesting idea, and we would be very eager to share it with you if we have some results in the future. This marks the end of my presentation. I would be happy to discuss if there are any questions. Thank you very much for your time and attention.